My first gun season was back in 1987. My brother and I hunted the Thumb area, and I think in the first hour, literally, I counted 400 shots. It was crazy. It was flat, lots of ag land, and every section of land out of 640 acres, it might have been 40 acres of woods at the most. Some sections didn't have any woods, maybe just a couple fence rows, but there's still 4-8 hunters on them in different sides of the fence row, different ends. And every 40-acre woods, if there was one that even that big, which was really rare there, might have 8 guys in it, 6 guys, 4 guys. At 10-acre woods would have 3 people, 5-acre woods, 2 or 3 people. It seemed like a war zone, but to us it was fun. It was a great time. But I quickly learned that when we were hunting out in those open areas and we were seeing lots of deer moving back and forth, that after the first couple hours of morning, it was pretty dead until people started moving around, pushing deer. What you learned to hunt back then was pressure. You learned to avoid pressure, move to the opposite side of cover of pressure. And it was a really different hunting compared to then coming out into Wisconsin, Minnesota, where it was big private land parcels, where you just didn't have a lot of people pushing deer. So we had to act differently in those locations versus in Michigan, where we had to hunt funnels, areas where we expected deer to be pushed into, where we couldn't necessarily do that out here. And when you come out in certain states, if it's not during the rut, then what you find is you're sitting there hoping deer get pushed to you, and they're not moving. So for those of you in pressured area, even in Wisconsin, one of my best bucks, I think it was back in 2011, we specifically set up, we had neighboring pressure, and this is one of the tactics that worked really well for me, even going back to 1993. And this is if you have the room to move around, it might even be like in this case, there's this patch of cover that I could hunt that was just about 4 or 5 acres. It was a corner of a neighbor's 120. Neighbor meaning friend and someone that let me hunt on their land. But I'd go down to that corner, the rest was ag on his property, and that butted up against a river bottom on the south side, and then on the west side, woods. The west side of woods was extremely thick, and on the opposite side of that, because it was drier and that was the approach, was where there was solid hunting pressure. So what I learned pretty quickly is if I went around those big food sources, around the big ag, where I thought deer were at in the morning, and I got in the back side of the cover where I expected the deer to be pushed from, meaning there's a lot of pressure here, cover, and then I get on that back side, especially on a funnel, that worked out really well for me. So just an end around where you're getting all the way around the back side of cover and then waiting for people pressure worked great in Wisconsin too, meaning neighboring pressure, kind of just patchwork of woods, and then really good holding cover during the day, and then we go through another neighbor's property to get all the way around, open cover where you didn't expect deer to be, and then wait for those deer to come by, and then you're shooting those deer at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock. Extremely good tactic. The only difference is, the only bad thing is you can't expect deer to just consistently come from that pressure typically. What I mean by that is once that group of deer or certain deer, even if they're running into those areas, they're pushed to you, you just quickly run out of deer to come your way by the end of the morning. So that consistent pressure didn't always work throughout the entire day. And then what do you do for the afternoon? AM opener. This works really well. I love sitting back in the cover. I love waiting for deer to come to me. And if I didn't have that pressure, maybe think about that pressure being food. Meaning that you're waiting for deer to come off a distant food source, you're letting them go through somewhat open cover, and then you're getting in the thick cover, but on the back side of it, you're waiting for them. I think far too often we go through the food sources, through the open cover to get to the cover. We go through the areas the deer are actually traveling into, and then those deer move through that area, they pick up our scent, we push them on the way through, and we don't get to hunt that unpressured cover. And what I find is that unpressured cover, depending on how thick your neighborhood is, how far the deer, when I was in the UP of Michigan, the deer might move 3/4 of a mile. When you're in open Pennsylvania, public land, like we're going to later in this month for the opener of Pennsylvania gun season, they can move a mile. It's just very open timber, and when they get pushed, they go a long ways because it takes a long ways for them to feel comfortable to slow down. So this could be 300 yards back or a mile back. Really open, not a lot of deer. You might find that you move a mile back. Deer moving used to moving a lot greater distances, in wilderness or big open wood timber areas. Where in ag land, it might be very compact because once they move 300 yards, they're now out in the open for 3/4 of a mile before they get to the next patch. So consider that distance, where you're at, how far those deer might move. I love this tactic in the morning. Again, setting up in the backside of cover, waiting for deer to come to you. But then it's all about PM food for me during gun season. You know, a lot of times after that first day, it's a little bit different here in Minnesota because our gun opener is right smack dab in the middle of the rut. So we can have bucks cruise through. We had 2 small ones cruise through this morning through a small hunting plot. That can happen when it's during the rut and they're just out looking. They can cruise through at any time. You get into a secure area, get into a blind, wait for the deer to move through. Again, we're not getting into an area where there's a lot of deer in the morning. We're trying to move around them, wait for them to come back to us off the big food sources. The bottom line is it's all about PM food during gun season. We've done really well hunting established good food sources. Private land might be food plots, could be ag fields that aren't pressured, and waiting for those deer to come out into those food sources in the afternoon. And what you find is the more you don't pressure the cover adjacent to those food sources, the stronger and hotter that food source becomes for daylight afternoon activity. Therefore, a lot of our best bucks in Wisconsin are 4, 5, 6-year-olds that have been shot with a gun during the season throughout the decades, have been shot the 3rd day, the 4th day, the 7th day, the 9th day of the gun season. And then you get into muzzleloader, just an extension. So those later days, the blade buck during our season here, a lot of our best bucks even here in Minnesota, these first 4 seasons have been shot. We've had really good opportunities later in the season to where we've been able to watch some of these older bucks. I watched Lucky last year, a 5-year-old. I really enjoyed watching them. That was that later season sit, where we can actually watch them coming into food sources. But again, you spook out those food sources, it's done. So in gun season, the name of the game is, yeah, you can hunt those big food sources. Make sure you can get in and out of your blind without spooking deer. Make sure you can access to that blind without spooking deer. And then when you're in the blind, take great pains to position it so that you're not spooking deer in the blind, getting in, out, moving around in the blind. Because once you do that on these food sources this time of year, it's done. It's better to, you have a gun. Better to shoot 10 more yards, 20 more yards, 50 more yards, and be completely safe. You also get a better wind angle then to blow your scent. But really set up for those afternoon. Folks, it's time for the rut, and that means you need to check out my rut web class. It'll help you navigate the entire rut. But more importantly, QuietKat is one of our important partners. And through that partnership, they've offered to clients, people that contact us, an incredible discount and opportunity to buy a new QuietKat. Look for an email that you can contact and the contact information in the description, but I really want to pass that off to you. We don't do that very often, but I want to make sure you guys don't miss out if you're looking and in the market for a new QuietKat. What about getting into your stand? You know, what I really like opening morning really depends on where you think the deer are. You know, if they're out in distant ag fields, then you can slip in and then wait for them to come through. What time do they move? They move right at daybreak, so you can get in there 15 minutes, 20 minutes before. But if you're going into locations where you expect deer to be pushed into, thick cover areas, where it takes a little bit of work and some noise to get back to, I'd rather get in there very early, especially when you're in those thick, remote locations just waiting for deer to come back to you. What you find is you might move into those locations and those deer might come in 2 hours after daylight. When they come in 2 hours after daylight, you might think, well, I could have got here pretty late. They're not even coming in for 2 hours after daylight. No, it means you did a good job. And what it also means is those deer could have been 100 yards away, 200 yards away, just staging as they're going back to their bedding area, getting a bite to eat, moving slowly, making rub scrapes, and then they finally get back to you, but they weren't that far away to the point where if you would have moved in too late, you would have spooked them. You wouldn't have seen them 2 hours later because you would have spooked them in that transition area somewhere in between that you should be going around to get into that backside of cover in the morning. Afternoon hunts, I like to get in 3 hours before. Now it's a little bit different again in Wisconsin or Minnesota when it opens this smack dab in the middle of the rut. Then do you get in your afternoon food source stand noon, 1? And some of you say, why would you move? Well, if you're back in a bedding area and you're back in an area with a lot of cover, you're waiting for deer to come to you, they're either there or they're not typically. So once I sit there for half a day, I haven't gotten a shot, I don't think anything's near, I want to get out of there while the getting's good, middle of the day, and then I want to go find a food source stand. In the case of Minnesota, then I want to go quickly to an afternoon food source stand and sit down, because it's during the rut. A buck can be moving any time of the day. But typically, as it gets later into the season, I want to sit for at least 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Typically, I'm going to the blind at 4 hours, 4.5 hours in, and then I'm settling in and getting at least that 3 to 3.5 hour window for the afternoon. A lot of times, if you're getting in there 2 hours before, now again, we're talking about hunting unpressured food. It's different if you're hunting in a bait pile in the middle of the UP in Michigan, for example. They might come in the last 10 minutes. But I'm looking at unpressured food sources where you're watching. You could have those little does and fawns. They're coming in 2 hours before, hour and a half before. They're bedding right on the edge. So I'd rather get in early. And here's the thought too. You get in early, you happen to spook them 3 hours in, 3.5 hours in. I don't think that's a big foul as it gets closer to dark when you're getting out of the blind. And it's really important if you're out spooking them an hour before getting into the blind. So I really like that 3.5 hour sit. And then finally, later in the week. I love, again, hunting later in the week during gun season. Yeah, opening day is tradition. It's a lot of fun. It's family, it's friends, it's group text. Did you see anything? Did you get anything? It's exciting. But what I'm really looking forward to is, again, that third day, that fourth day, that seventh day, when you can hunt those unpressured food sources and deer gathering. Because you know what? There's not a lot of unpressured food sources and good cover combinations in the deer neighborhood. There really is not. Most people are driving their ATVs in, they're pushing deer, they're shooting does on opening day, which is a big no-no because you can always shoot does later. I always look at it, if I have a buck down, then I might turn my gun to a doe if I have a doe tag and I want to fill it, or 2 or 3. But until that time, I don't want to, because the buck is the lowest hole in the bucket. He's the hardest one to get. So opening day, now maybe you're only going after does. Then all the strategies for not, just shoot the first doe you see and have fun. It's not a big deal. But the point is if you are actually going for mature bucks, wait till you shoot that mature buck and then turn your gun towards a doe, shoot your does, and then you're going in all at one time to get those deer and retrieve those deer. But again, later in the week, that's what I'm really looking forward to. I can't wait to sit. Just get in. Maybe you have a hard day at work, long day at work, whatever's going on in your life. There's nothing better than getting in a pop-up, getting in a tree stand, getting in a ground blind, elevated blind, whatever it might be, sitting back, relaxing, and watching an unpressured food source fill up with deer when you never know. The biggest one in the woods might be coming and stepping out at any time. Why do you have that hope? Because you know you haven't spooked the cover or spooked the food source that relates to that movement that you're watching. And to me, that's one of the funnest times of gun season. I go to a lot of clients where they say, oh, we're really more bow hunters. We don't like to gun hunt. But when you set it up properly on your land and it's easy to do, and you let it mature over time, kind of really sweet, like a fine wine, age like a fine wine, then boy, it's really addicting because it's enjoyable to sit back. Jackson, my son, he was less than a year old, and his first hunt was, I think he was 8 months old, 6 months old, whatever it might have been, going on Thanksgiving Day, sitting with Jen and I watching the field fill up with deer. Pretty cool. So plan for that. Hope you can navigate your opener and your gun season too. It's just about the opener, and really set your expectations. You know, people talk about hunting a little bit later, going out in morning hunts. I do, if again I can expect deer to be coming into me later in the morning for whatever reason. And what you find is if you're hunting in a good bedding area, a lot of times they already beat you there. So really consider this PM. That's what I'm going to leave you with the closing thought, that PM hunting later in the week can be golden on unpressured food sources. Don't miss out this gun season and beyond. I appreciate you guys watching the YouTube channel, but I don't know if everyone knows everything that we have to offer, whether it's on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, our website, our WHS Wildlife Blends, our seed company. Also Instagram you can check out. I'm very active on Instagram, putting strategies on there, photos of what we do every day. Much more active there than Facebook. But our seed, web classes, books, clients, articles. I have over 600 articles on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, everything whitetail strategy. Of course, we have hats on there, and then make sure to check us out on Instagram again. But lots of stuff to offer. We're always coming out with new things, and this isn't the end of it. We have more things coming soon. Make sure to check us out.